You guys put your hands up if you've seen the new Rebel show. It's good. You should check it out. This next slide is the models we're releasing for... Hey guys, welcome to another Lords of War Games and Hobbies video. This is Chris and Jay. And we do these kind of videos a couple times a week where we talk about pertinent issues, concerns, fun stuff, hobby things in the industry with our 20 odd years of industry experience and running a hobby shop and all that fun stuff. Today we wanted to kind of talk about the IP world and how it crosses into the miniature world and some of the problems, I guess I use that word, or concerns or dangers you kind of have as a company when you tie your livelihood or yourself to the inevitable whale that is that IP or whatever, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's on one hand, it is the easy sort of slam dunk way to get a game or product up and going very quickly, because you're like, people know it, it's safe. Sometimes it fills a category that maybe doesn't have a lot in it. So I would say in the last 5 years, it was with miniatures, tabletop wargaming miniatures specifically, to have IP-based game. We're talking about Star Wars games, Marvel games, Halo, you name it.
Game of Thrones. Like you get into the board game world, it gets even bigger. Like Dark Souls is all the video games. Yeah.
And people are like, on one hand, people are like, yes, they made minis from this thing. It's my two favorite things are together now. The fictional world that I really love following and watching, reading, and these miniatures. And then there's the other side, which is like, well, what happens when these things like sort of invariably run out of steam or content, or just are exhausted in the. Yeah, right. I don't even know if it's this. I think it's just... You
think it's just this and then this or whatever?
That's what it sounds like.
Oh my,
and I mean, we've seen it here a few times.
And what comes to mind more recently, obviously, is sort of like the Disney or the House of Mouse or whatever, and just seeing like sort of the Marvel Crisis Protocols and the Shatterpoints and the Legions and the X-Wings and seeing that stuff kind of come out and kind of start strong almost every time. And then really start to kind of drop off when, there's a whole bunch of stuff I'll get into specifically. But ultimately, people's emotions and how it's tied to these intellectual properties can change pretty drastically in like that, right?
Yeah.
Like how you feel about it.
Yeah, I mean, we could definitely, if we look at Marvel Crisis Protocol, when was it at its peak? Well, Infinity War... some of their major X-Men releases, and maybe also some of the Spider-Man movies.
Sure. And so the absolute zenith of
their best
of like the Marvel stuff that they've been putting out.
Yeah. And everything else, not so much. Did we sell? Was there a surge in Black Panther related releases when they did a couple extra movies and I don't think they got a show? No. Or. Did you get any extra Asgardian releases when they did some, more Thor movies and Loki? No. So it's like, and those are some of those are quality shows and movies.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
And in our little cold open, Chris mentioned the a Star Wars show or whatever, and we recently kind of witnessed, the reaction to that, where it was like, it looks like Atomic Mass has some really nice miniatures to coincide with the show. And I mean, on the Star Wars end, it's a little more. There's a lot of shows now.
There's a lot of shows, yeah.
So,
but ultimately, the question it poses is ultimately what happens if, like, a lot of people haven't seen the show.
Yeah,
right?
Like who's going to care about this character? Yeah. And I don't know what it is. It doesn't seem to, like when Games Workshop makes a new faction or bring back just make a bottle out of thin air for some reason. It just needs to look cool, and people will go and read the fluff and make up their minds on it. But on the Star Wars thing or the IP thing, it's like if it doesn't match something you're familiar with,
like what if Han's face doesn't work, or like the Leia model? That doesn't look like Leia to me or something. Like weird things like that, right? Like matter more.
Yeah.
And
they sure do. Like
they're so like the releases become so show theme movie dependent, almost to like, to the extreme, right? And then getting into another point, what happens when you realize like the world is actually not as big as you think it is, and the amount of things that they can actually make isn't as many as they thought. Well, you see it with you've seen it with the Marvel game. What happens when you get out of the A tier characters and you start making the B and C characters? Well, surprise, people don't care as much.
No.
People don't love Beta Ray Bill as much as they love Thor, God of Thunder,
No,
right?
they
Like,
don't,
he's a character in that. Yeah, he has his own comic, whatever.
Sure.
But he only matters in the context of how Thor mattered, right? Like, at least for most people. And so what you're really drawing from a smaller range of ideas that ultimately you as the company have no control over. Zero control.
Yeah, there's little, everything has to like kind of look like be approved. You can't really get mega creative. You can only kind of deal with like what's been already made or what some concept art has already existed.
Yeah, they have a brand manager. They have to approve stuff with the House of Mouse, who controls all of that stuff.
And then you also don't really get to control when you get to release it, because they're going to be like, okay, but we have this thing come out, it needs to tie to this. It's the whole, like, it's like when, when some of these things, Star Wars toys have, you literally like started influencing what's in the movie. Like Jar Jar exists because of the toy, angle, whatever, etc. So, or the famous, was it Captain Phasma or whatever? Just how much.
Oh my God! You saw all the stuff before the movie. Oh, she's gonna be a big character, and then she's like 4 seconds of screen time. She has shiny armor. I'm like, oh yeah, that's a toy.
Does she even have one line? Yeah, it's a toy.
It's a toy. Yeah.
She's the Boba Fett for the new whatever the last trilogy.
I don't think so though.
But Boba Fett's also hilarious.
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone wants him though.
Yeah.
Toy.
Boba Fett.
Anyway, what? So this is it, right? So the real fundamental question is like, is this a viable way to create a product line that will last? And maybe it isn't. Maybe even the companies making it are like, well, we have this for some years. Maybe that's why the license expire and they're happy. They're just like, okay, and then we'll do something. Yeah, I think make our money now. And
I think the proof's in the pudding a little bit. I think you see that. I think you see with like Atomic Mass is a good example. They know they have to make new Star Wars games, because there are diminishing returns on their old ones.
Yep. And they pay a lot for the license, so they gotta,
At some point, you can't every single person, I remember how excited people were when they saw those little X-Wings and TIE Fighters. And then the next wave of stuff came out. Oh, a B-Wing and a Y-Wing. These are so awesome. I remember these. And then the burger comes out and you're like, oh, what's that?
Yeah, right.
That's a droid ship. You're like, okay.
Yeah.
And
you start making, are the rules?
If you're excited about that, cool, that's awesome. But like a lot of people were like, I don't know what that is. I have no like attachment to that thing. And then so there's diminishing returns, right? And I think all IPs get into that, where like the longer they go, the less interesting the products kind of become. So there's almost like a trap to it.
Yeah.
Or a shelf life to it.
Yeah, I remember. Right? Now I'm thinking of exactly what you're talking about. He was like second ed X-Wing, and they released like some Miners Guild.
That's right. Yeah.
Like I was like, what is this or whatever, and I always refer to myself because I'm like not the Star Wars guy.
Right.
At all.
Right.
Like I watched some of the mainline movies. I know of a bunch of things, but I don't deep dive any of the lore.
I haven't played like the video games.
I don't play a lot of the video games. No.
Stuff.
Yeah. Like some of it, I'm like, oh, that's neat, whatever. But so for me, it's like, I'm the guy, and I realize like observing other customers, like half the time, that's most people. They're like, I don't know what this is. Like, you get a few people that, or you get even worse example, where you get a guy who actually knows a lot about it, and he's like, oh, they didn't get this right. This is wrong for some reason. You're like, wow, you can't even get that guy interested.
Oh no.
Anyway.
Yeah, so going into a new point, I think, and kind of what you're touching on, I think, is I think there's also this element of it's harder for people, especially in the hobby. Like we get into the hobby because we have that creativity. We want to make things and create our own worlds. I think ultimately, not everybody, but it's a big part of why people do physical things like that. And the intellectual property games versus something like a Games Workshop, which is obviously their own IP. Like, let's say it's still an intellectual property, but it is created by them and manufactured by the company making the miniatures, right? So they own it themselves. Ultimately, there's more sandbox there. Oh, yeah. There's more an ability from a person who's entering that hobby to be creative and build their own world and universe. There's more potential there for that. Like, Timmy that buys his first Space Marines and has like his own like Blood Angels captain. That guy doesn't have a name, right? He doesn't have a story. You can think one up for him. You can think up. Yeah. And while there is a lot of stuff written on the Blood Angels, there's so much room still in like all these other like companies and stuff like that. No one's written a story about the 11th company or whatever. So maybe you can in your games, right? So there's always that potential there in 40K. And the other thing you kind of get more when you get into a game, one of Games Workshop's properties, is I feel like there's almost like there's a bit more mystery to it. Because, and this might change in 5 to 10 years when they make all these shows and it becomes more mainstream, maybe it starts to flip the other way, right? But at least right now, there's still a little bit of mystery. Like when you get in, you're like, oh man, there's like 20 factions. I don't know who these guys are. And you kind of want to find out who they are, right?
Yeah.
Whereas like the Star Wars thing, it's like, have you seen the show? They're from the show.
Right.
If you watch the show, you know what they do. And then you're like either excited or not excited about that, right? So I don't know. It's definitely got its strengths, like you said. Like I think, myself, I buy like the Marvel models to paint them because I love, I still have those nostalgic moments of like remembering watching the old X-Men show and the Spider-Man cartoons and stuff like that. And I really enjoy that aspect of it. But there are limits to exploiting that nostalgia,
Yeah.
Like there's probably like 50 mutants that I think are cool. And then like another 100 after that they might still make, which I'm like, wow, those are really minor characters.
Yeah.
And although I remember them from the comics and stuff, I'm not as excited to like, buy and paint the model.
So then knowing that, what happens, because we've seen this happen now, is because there's still like a company in the tabletop wargaming industry, let's say, and so there's like certain cyclical or methods or trends or things that companies do to make something last over the years, and these things involve remakes, redos, new additions, refreshes, and things like that. Now we've witnessed it a few times. Is in the Games Workshop world, it's not hard. It's like they just like slowly append things, or they just give models new rules, and everyone's like, great. And they actually, if anything, it incentivizes them to try more new things. In the Star Wars world or Marvel world or whatever, they release a new Wolverine or something, and people are like, I already have him. I don't care.
Ultimately, this is the problem, right? Like, Games Workshop new starter set has a blank check to a universe, right? It has Space Marines.
And then
if you have Space Marines already, it doesn't mean you don't want more of them. Like, like I'm one of these people. Like I painted a lot of different colored Space Marines, right? And that's ultimately the beauty of that design, is that they can keep putting Space Marines out, and it works. Whereas, like you said, like if they've already redone like that, or the original like core box with the Avengers in it, and while the new one, they're stunning.
Sure.
The models look beautiful. Like the resculpts are great.
Great.
Ultimately, a lot of people didn't care because they bought that already, right? They're like, I don't want a third Doc Ock, or I don't want, and so I think you're kind of you're fighting a bit of an uphill battle there, I think, in that regard. Yeah,
and I've same with like saw Game of Thrones or whatever. Like, what, are you gonna buy if they make an alternate sculpt of a Lannister pikeman? Are you gonna care?
I mean,
how do you're so tied to the show and the lore that
I'm happy that people still play it, but I mean, like it's that's a great example of like almost nobody's talking about Game of Thrones anymore. You know what I mean? Like, just in terms of like, they have the new
like
House of Dragon show.
People that are enjoying the game a lot, but
which is cool. But like,
and this is a bit of a broader little point, because this ties into some of our other recent videos about other companies and what's going on. Is people, and we see it in the comments a lot. People are like, no, this game is super healthy. Like there's like 50, 100 people playing this here, 200 people played that recently there, and it's like that's fantastic, like legitimately fantastic. That has zero bearing on how well the game is selling.
That's right.
Zero.
That's right.
I know it sounds like it does, but it has zero, because those people already made their purchases.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, they already did. They already spent their money. Great. And now they have nothing left to spend it on, because there's nothing to spend it on.
Right.
So, I just want to like throw that out there, and I'll probably throw it out there in more videos. Is just stop with the like,
Yeah.
Oh, I see this game played with like 1,000 people play Blood Bowl once a year. Something. Who cares? It doesn't. It does not matter. It doesn't mean that the game is like booming.
Because you could use your 30-year-old Blood Bowl
You
models.
can.
Like
You
that's
can. And
ultimately
you should.
it's not.
And
And you should. And
You should.
it's awesome that people are enjoying that.
Yeah.
It's just like those are completely separate things. That's a good
They're
point.
just separate.
They're just separate things. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll end the video a little bit on one last thing. I think that's a really important part of this discussion. I think this is more on the business side, and it's just kind of talking about the reality. I think the other thing that's kind of scary about like the companies that are kind of bolted to these intellectual properties that they don't own is the ultimate like fact that they are paying royalties on this stuff. So they are effectively paying rent to a bigger company that kind of owns them in a way. It's like a business paying rent for the building that they're in. There's this cost that they'll always have to pay, and it'll always be there. It could go up anytime, could get taken away from them, and so there's this rentier thing going on there that needs to be considered, and it's something that companies that create their own intellectual property that work hard to build that up over time. That is the payoff there, that they're the masters of their destiny in a way where they can kind of control that a little bit more.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a stability element to it.
Yeah. Like it's miniatures are very interesting or unique in that like everything happens at a way different pace because of the long lead up and design time and everything. You can't really pivot and make a change that rapidly. Like everything has to be set months or years in advance. It's like so slow moving like that. So it's you make it like the stuff that's released now. It's like wild seeing like some companies release a thing and it flops, and it's like, but they already put all the money down and built all this stuff, and like something comes out and it flops, and that's enough because now they don't have the resources next time to pump it in or whatever. It's like they have to be really careful with the thing. And again,
but there's also this weird like supply chain thing going on there that almost like anchors you to that failure if it happens, because you had to, because of the where like if you're getting models made and produced in China, a lot of people talk about like a 16 to 20 month lead time for design, from design to production to actually like deploying these things in stores. You could have already had almost like 2 years in the pipeline of more stuff to come out to support that thing that failed like on launch, right?
Again,
so it's kind of scary.
So imagine, so it's back to our like right to the beginning of the video. So imagine that like you knew that show was coming out, or that movie was coming out, or that material was coming out, and you created toys for it, and then the thing came out and no one cared. And then the toys arrived later, or at the same time, and people are like, I hope we
didn't make miniatures for the Marvels or whatever. Yeah.
Or,
hey guys, like and subscribe. I hope hope you enjoy this content. We do this a couple times a week, as we said before. You can support us on Patreon. We're super professional. And like and subscribe. That helps us out a ton, even though people don't watch the end. They missed our funny jokes.
That's right.
And it's too bad.
Post if you saw it.